Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Conrad Robinson, and I will be your moderator for this morning. Before we begin, we have some ground rules that we would like to cover for this webinar. This webinar is being recorded. All video and audio have been turned off for participants. If you have questions, please type them in the Q&A box below. Your questions will be answered by one of the panelists live or responded to in the box. So let me just repeat. All questions, if you have questions, please type them in the Q&A, and all questions will be responded to at the end of the session. As I mentioned before, my name is Conrad Robinson. I am the Western Jamaica Regional Office Manager for Jampro. And I want to welcome you this morning to this conversation. Today, we will be having a series of conversations where we will be exploring the topic, Unleashing Export Opportunity 2021 and beyond. Again, if you are just joining us, welcome. In this first segment, we will be having a conversation on positioning your products for export market opportunities. And joining me in this conversation will be Mr. Lawrence Jones, Manager of Jampro's European Office, Mr. Stephen Charu, Council Trade and Investment Officer, Jampro, North American Regional Office, Mr. Nicholas Sutherland, Manager at Jampro with responsibility for new market development, and he will be focusing on the Eastern Caribbean market. And last but not least, Mr. Junior Douglas, CEO at Dees Import out of the UK. Good morning, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us this morning. But let me begin with you, Lawrence. What are the lessons learned, if any, since COVID-19 pandemic set in? What areas of export and trade have been impacted the most?
Thank you, Conrad, for the kind invitation to attend today and for the introduction. Well, as many of your exporters know, the bulk of Jamaican exports to the UK is fresh produce as well as processed food and beverages. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the global supply chains, and Jamaica's exports have also been affected. Perishable goods, which are transported by air in particular, have been the worst affected because carriers such as British Airways, Virgin, TUI, that would carry air cargo have reduced their services to Jamaica during the pandemic. So sea freight continues to operate consistently. So there's an issue with transport. But on the UK consumer demand side, we've observed an increase in demand for Jamaican food products as more people have been working from home. So we now see new online grocery companies offering Afro-Caribbean food home deliveries and so on. So in a nutshell, COVID has had a positive impact on demand for Jamaican exports, but a negative impact on routes to market. But I genuinely believe that throughout the course of this year, airlift will be normalized and our products will start to arrive back into the UK consistently by airlift.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. We will come back to you. We have some other questions for you, but I just want to switch focus now across the pond, as they would say. And I'm going to ask Stephen Charu, who is representing the North American region, pretty much the same questions. What are the lessons learned, if any, since COVID pandemic set in? And what areas of export and trade have been impacted by the most from your market perspective?
Okay, thanks, Conrad. Morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are. So for North America, and I will touch on some points more specifically for Canada, but in general for North America, as Lawrence highlighted, we did see a lot of disruptions in the logistics shipping side of it. So I know right now, even for Canada, we have a very live situation where flights have been canceled until April. This is of great concern to us because, as you probably are aware, the majority of Jamaican fresh produce, which is air freighted, is done via cargo, passenger cargo, or passenger planes. So if those planes are not operational, then it means then we're at the mercy of these travel restrictions, right? So that's one of the biggest takeaways from the pandemic. So we need to strengthen our shipping options. Outside of that, I think one of the other key takeaways that there are a few unexplored opportunities for export. I mean, in particular, Jamaica made its first shipment of toilet paper to the US at the beginning of the pandemic. This is something that we've never really explored before as an export item. So it means, therefore, that there may be new unexplored opportunities that we can tap into. Uh, for Canada in particular, we have noted a major shift in consumer trends. It means that the market is willing to try new things. Consumers have gotten more acquainted with their kitchens, or rather, Canadian consumers have gotten more acquainted with their kitchens, cooking at home instead of going out or ordering in. A report out of Dalhousie University has shown that Canadians are buying more food that has are buying food that has shifted from canned goods and non-perishables from the start of the pandemic to more fresh produce now. There's also a greater focus on convenience packaging, healthier alternatives, ready-to-cook products. So it means that these are the areas that we should be looking at in terms of our food exports.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Nick, over to you. I know the Caribbean market is different from the UK and the North American market, but we are also grappling with the effects of COVID in our region. And I just wondered whether or not you have seen any impact as far as trade to the Eastern Caribbean is concerned.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Conrad. Thank you for that question. I think the challenges really has been downturn in certain economies, which are, like ourselves, heavily dependent on tourism. The lockdowns obviously have shifted consumption, and containers have been a challenge. Not so much the shipping lines themselves, but getting enough containers, especially when it comes to things like refrigerated containers. But consolidators and freight forwarders have been working assiduously in the past couple of months to kind of close that circle. And I think it's gotten a lot better than it was, let's say, in June or July of this year.
All right, great, thank you. And so COVID have had some impact, but there is also both negative and positive impacts. Now, having said that, I'm going to go back to Lawrence, and I want to ask him this question. In your opinion, what are the three major issues Jamaica must resolve to increase export sales to your market? And I might just add that Stephen and Nick, you may want to consider that as well, because I will be coming back to you with the same question.
Being put on the spot, I think one is packaging, and improving the types of packaging is very important. Secondly, I think we have to diversify the products that we're sending to market. So there, for example, there may be a huge demand for breadfruit. Well, do some research and development to have breadfruit prepared and packaged in such a way that it has a long shelf life. And also regarding food, products which are easy to prepare. We've seen quite a few of those in the Jamaican supermarkets as well, so it's not uncommon even at home, and it's a norm here. So we want to see that. And really, to grow markets, we need new products in the market. So types of products which haven't been accepted here are dairy products. So if we can resolve the regulatory issues of getting dairy products into Europe, I think we will see an increase in our exports as well. I hope that
Thank you,
helps.
Lawrence. So I just want to remind our participants that if you have questions, please type them in the Q&A below. We will respond to them at the end of the session. So Stephen, same questions for you. What three major issues would you say Jamaica must resolve to increase export sales to your market?
Thanks, Conrad. I'm going to add a different perspective to this. I do agree with Lawrence that we have challenges with pricing, consistency, packaging, etc., and those need to be very tailored to the market that you're exporting to. But I think even going back further and taking a higher level look at Jamaica's agricultural industry or sector, I believe that we should have started from yesterday, but now is really a good time for us to upgrade our capacity and our offerings as a local sector, right? First, to service the local market, and then to use the success of that thriving local sector to service our overseas markets. That is to say, our agricultural industry needs some work at the moment. There's an untapped global demand for Jamaican products, but we have to be willing to meet our buyers halfway and our consumers all the way. More local direct investment is needed from what we're seeing, both from private and public sectors. Our brands and products must carry global appeal. So this is something that we need to be mindful of. If we want to attract large FDI, the terms need to be right. What we have seen, however, is increased investment from our diaspora business folk in the agricultural sector here in Canada. There's been a notable uptick in investments in organic farm operations, particularly to service the Canadian market. So that's one main point. Secondly, as with any business endeavor, you have to do your research. But international trade takes on a different or another level of acuity, which requires sound research and planning. Do you have an export strategy? Is scalability a key component of this export strategy? And finally, consolidation and working together. So as we're all are aware, agriculture is a value chain. Food exports fall along that value chain. It's not the beginning, it's not the end. But what about the links or the stages before that, before we get to the export? Those can get messy. Farmer versus landowner versus packing house versus consolidators. And this is where I believe we have the greatest opportunity for coming together as an industry and consolidating in the sector. Exporters need to have more adequate control of the value chain up until the point of export. This assures international buyers about the supply and consistency in quality and pricing, the biggest factors for them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Stephen. So clearly, there's some work that GOJ needs to do, Government of Jamaica, but there's also some work that the private sector needs to do as well if we are going to improve our export sales to both the UK and the North American market. You mentioned consolidation, and we do have an opportunity to hear from a consolidator herself, and she will be speaking to us a little bit later about those opportunities. But Nick, the Eastern Caribbean is a market that I don't think many Jamaicans exporters really look to in terms of export opportunities. So from your perspective and being somebody who worked in that market, what do you think is the three most important things that we need to resolve here to increase export sales to the Eastern Caribbean market?
Conrad, thank you for that question. Yes, a lot of exporters don't immediately think of the Eastern Caribbean. I myself, as you mentioned, I have experience managing that market for both LASCO and Grace Kennedy, and it is a tremendous market, often overlooked by some of the small distributors. With Cinco, Grace, LASCO, put a huge emphasis on those markets, not only in terms of margins, but in terms of very brand loyal, if you can get your and establish your brand. Islands like Barbados, Trinidad, Antigua can be very, very lucrative. Also, your shelving costs and your marketing costs are much lower than trying to go into the US. And it's a really good place to learn the export business. As I said, depending on the supermarkets and depending on the islands, you really have much lower shelving fees than trying to go into the US market. One of the things that people should bear in mind, because of the differing economies across each of these islands, and I'm going to focus now on CARICOM Islands, it's a good idea to kind of do a little research and talk to some distributors and have multiple price lists. Both Grace Kennedy and LASCO, we had different price lists, different prices for products for Trinidad, Barbados, St. Lucia, Antigua. So literally we'd have a different price list because the economies are a little bit different in each country, and also the brandscape, the type of brands that are there and the competitors kind of force you to be a little bit more agile. So it's a better idea to have at least, I would say, four different price lists, one for Barbados, one for Trinidad, another one for St. Lucia, Antigua, Grenada, and then another one for like the Dutch islands, St. Martin.
Great. But Nick, just to stick with you for a minute, I know you spoke a lot about the processed food market and the opportunities there. Is there anything happening on the fresh produce side?
Well, these islands, the smaller islands, places like Barbados, Trinidad, especially St. Lucia, Grenada, import a lot of fresh produce. They import from St. Vincent, actually. St. Vincent imports, but they're also a net exporter of certain types of fresh produce. They import a lot from Guyana. United States, Colombia, Costa Rica. I think there is an opportunity there for Jamaican products, but these markets are very price sensitive and they have traditional long-term agreements and relationships with these other countries. For example, Trinidad imports a lot of fresh produce from Ghana. A lot of the farms in Ghana, the major farms, are now operated by Trinidadians. So I think there is a great opportunity, but I think we have to be very mindful of the price. But there's countries outside of Eastern Caribbean, I would say, like Cayman, which is a good market for us because they tend to import most of their fresh produce out of the United States. And I think that's, again, a very overlooked market when it comes to fresh produce. Bearing in mind, a lot of fresh produce used in Cayman and in St. Lucia and Bahamas have been in the food industry, in food service industry, so hotels and restaurants. But I think there is a tremendous opportunity there, and I think there might be some of our products which may be more price competitive than the traditional imports from the United States.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Just out of curiosity again, Nick, for you. So we know that there is a challenge logistically in terms of getting the products to UK and to Canada in particular. Do you have any such challenges in terms of cargo space going into the Eastern Caribbean?
No, traditionally there has been no problem with cargo space. The most important thing for Jamaican producers, especially depending on the kind of capacity that they're exporting, is to develop a very good relationship with a freight forwarder and a consolidator, because in many situations, as you're ramping up into these markets, you're not selling full containers. You need consolidation. One thing to bear in mind is that if you're going down to the French islands and down to St. Martin and the ABC Islands, you're going to have to go through Miami. There's not a space capacity, you just have to bear it in mind. It might be more of a factor for fresh produce, but it has been the traditional way that the companies like Grace and Lasco have been exporting down there, and there's no issue or problem with it. You just bear in mind you have a slightly longer shipping time. And
thank you very much.
I hadn't mentioned before that the Dutch islands are a unique opportunity because getting into the Dutch islands in terms of their phytosanitary requirements, and I'm talking about St. Martin, Aruba, Curacao, is relatively easy, and you don't actually need any Dutch or French labeling. You can actually go into the Dutch islands with English labeling.
Okay, great. So I just want our participants to recognize that the Caribbean, Eastern Caribbean in particular, is an export opportunity market, and that we need to now begin to look at how we can exploit those opportunities in the event that we have challenges getting our products to the UK, the Canadian market, and the North American market. Thank you very much, Nick, for that information. Just want to remind our participants that if you have your questions, I see them coming in, please type them in the Q&A. We will be responding to them at the end of the session. And just for those of you who might be wondering, this session is being recorded and it will be made available to you. So Lawrence, back to you. And just before I get to Junior, there's this one question I need to ask you, Lawrence. In the case of Europe, how has Brexit changed the way we do business with the UK?
Okay, well, Conrad, Brexit is on everybody's lips over here. The short answer is that Brexit does not appear to have had a significant impact regarding the way Jamaican goods are exported to the UK. On January 1 of this year, the UK CARIFORUM Economic Partnership Agreement, or EPA, came into force. So over the past month, we have not observed any significant change in the way Jamaican exports access the UK. As you're aware, the preferential export trade agreement between the European Union and CARIFORUM, which includes Jamaica, is no longer applicable to the United Kingdom, now that the UK has exited the European Union. So in order to maintain duty-free, quota-free access to goods exported from Jamaica to the UK, the UK CARIFORUM Economic Partnership Agreement came into force on the 1st of January this year. And this agreement mirrors the EU CARIFORUM EPA to ensure continuity of trade between Jamaica and the UK. So we continue to export goods to the UK at the same tariff and taxes which were applicable under the EU CARIFORUM EPA. So for example, most of the fresh produce, processed foods and beverages continue to benefit from these duty-free access. And just as a point of note, if you wish to confirm the tariff or tax that's applicable to your specific product, you can use the UK government online tool to confirm the import tariff, taxes, and the regulations that currently apply to a specific product being exported from Jamaica. And I'm happy to post the website address maybe in the Q&A.
Please
or
you can post
chat.
it in the chat.
Yeah. Alternatively, you can contact me after the webinar to discuss the products you wish to export to the UK. And I'll also put my email into the chat if that's all right with you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lauren. So good news, there has not been much changes. In fact, the process seems a little bit easier, given the fact that certain protocols are maintained as far as trade is concerned, although there is no Brexit, that we have to live with. Junior, thank you so very much for joining us. And as a distributor in the UK, I'm sure many of our participants will be happy to hear from you. And what we would like to find out from in your opinion, what are the top 5 products that are in demand that you are looking for? Certainly you can talk to us about some traditional, but we are more interested now in the new and emerging products.
Okay, well, thanks for the invite, much appreciated. You can send some of the warmth from Jamaica up here, that would be even nicer, but we will struggle on, we'll struggle on. Okay, in terms of products that we require from Jamaica, whilst there is a demand for what we call the same old, ackee, callaloo, things like that, always a demand for that. There is a growing demand for new products to be introduced to the marketplace, because we have a 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation growing up who are used to having food prepared, microwave, good to go. So yes, there's a demand. We still need ackee, we still need callaloo, we still need jerk seasoning, we still need all those things that we traditionally rely on. But at the same time, if we're looking forward to the next generation, we need to cater for their needs. A lot of that is going to be prepared food. So somehow, some way, we need to be able to supply them ackee and saltfish, whatever, already prepared. They take it, whack it in the microwave, and they're good to go. That's down the line. And in fact, that's coming relatively quickly, because what we've noticed since COVID and the lockdown, as Lawrence has said earlier, there's been a rapid growth in what up here we call them dark kitchens, where basically people have taken commercial kitchens in industrial units, cook, and it's Uber Eats, Deliveroo, no more shop front. And those are springing up all over the place and doing really good business, supplying, because people don't want to cook, particularly young people, they don't want to cook. So we find that's a fantastic growth opportunity. So yeah, I can't, as I said, I cannot name you 5 specific products that are required, but there is a demand for Jamaica to utilize its resources and produce things that are special and unique to Jamaica.
Thank you, Junior. I want you to stick around, because I'm sure there are going to be questions for you as it relates to the goods that you are looking for as a distributor in the UK market. But I just want to jump over to Stephen and pose to him the same question. What are those products that you're seeing being demanded in your market?
Thanks, Conrad. Similarly, I mean, the US and Canada share similar demand. I know sauces and condiments continue to maintain lion's share. For the US, we've seen an uptick in demand for mangoes and overall in fresh produce. I think for both Canada and the US, the demand for fresh produce has definitely increased notably since the pandemic, and it continues to gain interest. Notable mentions for particular crop products outside of the traditional ones that we're aware of. For Canada in particular, we've seen an uptick in interest in sorrel, sea moss, cassava. Yeah, I think those are the top 3 right now. I know yams and ackee remains in very high demand, especially for ackee. It's a challenge throughout the year. If you're in Canada, you'll notice the price will vary from probably $3 to $4.99 all the way up to $9.99 a tin. And this is really because of the supply that we just don't have enough to supply. So that would be the three products I would say that we should be looking at.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I noticed in the chat, a number of persons have been asking, can we get the email addresses for Junior and for all you guys in those markets? So if you can, post your email addresses in the chat so that the participants will be able to contact you. Over to you, Nick. Eastern Caribbean, I know you have mentioned before some of those products. Are there anything new that you would want to say that we should consider for those for the markets in the Eastern Caribbean?
I think, what was mentioned before, I think there also is a trend toward more processed food or things that are easily microwavable. And I know there's some Jamaican companies who are doing some very, very innovative food solutions in terms of, well, at least locally, I see it here, and I think there's a potential for them to be for export. Because again, more and more young people, especially professional young people, have less time to cook, and they don't really want to cook. And I think we see it here in Jamaica with the amount of microwave dinners and these kind of quick fix solutions. And I'm speaking now about processed food. So I think there's a real market for that also in the Eastern Caribbean. Places like Trinidad, Barbados, Cayman, especially, even going down to the Dutch islands also, I think there's a real need for that and an opportunity. And I think we need to also look at, realizing that as we go down to the Eastern Caribbean, some of their tastes might vary from ours. Pepper sauces are a very difficult product right now because in the Eastern Caribbean, they're overwhelmed by brands from Trinidad. Eastern Caribbean generally prefers things like mustard-based pepper sauces, which we don't do. So I think we need to look at different types of products than selling to the diaspora, because it's key to bear in mind that while the diaspora in England and New York and Canada might eat a lot of Jamaican food, St. Lucians and Grenadians, Trinidadians, Bajans, when they're at home, they eat their food. And I think we need to be very mindful of that in terms of some of the products we're looking to export there, which might be innovative, but to base it on the fact you're basically selling to neighbors but foreigners.
All right, great. Thank you, Nick. In fact, I just want to use this opportunity to thank all the panelists for joining us in this conversation in this first section. Just want to remind our participants that we do have an exporter readiness checkup, and you can visit our Jampro dobusinessjamaica.com website, and you can look at that checker to see if you are actually ready for the export market. Thank you again, gentlemen, for joining us. And at this time, we are going to go right into our next segment, which is going to be focused on consolidation. But just before we do that, we do have a short poll that we would love our participants to respond to. It will just be about 10-15 seconds, very few questions. So please, the poll will pop up on your screen, and we're going to ask you to just respond to them as quickly as you possibly can.
Conrad.
Yes.
Can I just give one example of a product where they've changed to meet the marketplace up here? Is that?
Yes, go ahead real quick.
Yeah, if you look behind me, we are the agents for True Juice in the UK. Yeah. And when we first started with True Juice, they used to come in them square cartons that used to buy in the supermarket. Yeah. And we used to bring them by air because they're very, very short shelf life. There's no way you could put them in a container, right? Days shelf life on them. Past 12, 18 months, True Juice have spent a fortune bringing in a packaging plant into Bogwalk where it's now Tetra packed. So because of that now, we have gone from selling a few hundred cases to selling thousands, containers every month. purely by them saying, look, the marketplace needs shelf-stable products, better packaging. They've revamped the whole product to suit the market, UK, US, everywhere else. And as I said, our sales have gone from a few hundred a month to thousands, to containers every month, purely by seeing what the market wants and meeting that demand. And they're head to head with some of the big brands up here.
You know, I really thank you, Junior, for that, because I neglected to say at the end of the discussion that what is emerging is that Jamaica need to begin to take a more serious look at processing. The truth is, yes, we do have our fresh produce and there will always be a demand for that. But I think this time, this period that we're now in, is saying to us, hey guys, value add, value add. I'm hearing value add. If we can add value to the products and ship them into those markets, we will have a very good chance of increasing our export sales. So thank you very much for that intervention indeed. So ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned before, we are going to go into our second section, which is going to be talking about consolidation. And based on the poll findings, 73% of you saying, yes, you are aware of consolidation. And also another 77% of you says, we do not know how to go about consolidating export shipment. So I think that this session is going to be important to you. And joining us this morning for this presentation is no other than Rita Hilton, of course, of Carita, and she is a consolidator extraordinaire. And we're going to ask her to just right now speak to us about consolidation, the benefits, and so on. So over to you, Rita.
Thank you, Conrad, and thank you for inviting me to this forum. And we are actually an exporter in our own right, but we also consolidate. And the consolidation is mainly in the processed food sector. So what does it really mean? That there may be a market, for example, or an importer from Canada or the US or the UK that wants a number of different companies to supply product to them. And we will bring that into our warehouse and go through the whole process and protocol to make sure it's free of contamination, do the paperwork, get the containers loaded onto the port. And we do this work for a fee. And generally speaking, the fee is less than going to a broker because we have also learned how to do our own brokerage forms and filling in customs and lodging it. So that is the traditional way really that we consolidate. The consolidation of fresh produce is a little bit more challenging, and we haven't really had an approach from any small farmers or producers to say, we have a market in this territory. Will you bring this produce together, put it together for us, and ship it to this market? So what that really means to consolidate is bringing a number of different units together under one load. And what is the benefit of that? The benefit is that you reduce the cost of doing individual paperwork, you reduce the cost of trucking and the logistical costs involved, and yet you have the expertise of the consolidator doing all the work for you to get that container on the wharf and ready to go to market. So those are the benefits really of consolidating in terms of just doing the shipping process. However, if there are a number of farmers who want to ship to a market, the first thing they need to do is to identify that market. Do your research. Do you have a clear goal to satisfy? Have you done your research on that importer? Is that in the blue book? Is he classified? Have you got authentic referrals? You don't want to get your produce from a number of different people going in one container and you can't get paid, because let me tell you, a lot of people want to export, but until you're paid, the export process is not complete, and that can bring down a lot of small farmers. One of the challenges of doing this is that farmers have different protocols on their farms. So there must be transparency within the group that wants to ship to a destination, a common destination. They must comply with protocols on spraying, land preparation. So good agricultural practices are essential for that, right? So they all along the value chain, there must be transparency, and the group must work as a group and as a team to get that produce to the warehouse where the produce will be packed and ready for market. So there are different factors. Number one, the protocols for fresh produce differ in different territories. A consolidator will know what those regulations are for the different territories. So that's the benefit of using a consolidator. Instead of each individual one going to have to learn what those protocols are, then it is very, very clear that all of the individual farmers' produce must be identified. So they must be stickered, they must have branding, they must be able to have traceability. If anything goes wrong with one of those items, we have to be able to trace back to that particular field or to that particular farmer. So those would be the challenges of the local farmers. The other challenge that farmers now face in order to look at consolidation is the fact that logistics have been severely compromised. Most fresh produce goes by air, and those linkages are very, very severely challenged, right? So again, we come to value added. We have to look at different ways to meet this challenge, and adding value to our fresh produce is going to be critical, right? That is one challenge that smaller farmers and producers face. Then a lot of farmers don't really know their costs. So they're jostling for price, and they're jostling amongst each other to be able to say, what will you pay me if I'm doing the consolidation? Rather than knowing, the group must know what their costs are, what they want to sell the produce for, and what their margins are going to be like. So there must be some consistency in producing fresh produce for a consolidator. And all those challenges must be faced, must be resolved before the decision is taken to consolidate. One of the challenges of the Eastern Caribbean is that the transportation, the smallest unit that you have is a 20-foot container. And a lot of these markets can't take a 20-foot container of just say sweet potatoes and pumpkin, or sweet potatoes and yam, the harder tubers. And the transit time to these markets is also a little bit difficult. If the container goes through the US, that means that certain produce cannot go through, like sweet potatoes, because once the container touches the US, it must face those protocols for importation into that country. So certain produce cannot go to the Eastern Caribbean, although they may be in demand, if the container touches or the vessel touches the US market, right? So what are the benefits of consolidation? It means that once the market is identified and it is there, then production can be tailor-made and technology used. It's a guaranteed market with a good, a guaranteed production for a guaranteed market. So that is really a huge benefit for farmers to produce once you can identify the market, right? And then consolidation would just fall into place with that. So these are some of the things. It also means that the importer is guaranteed consistency. If we have a good value chain coming right through, then the importer can say, I can put my head on the block. I know that this group will supply me with 500 boxes of Jamaican bananas, 400 boxes of sweet potato, 500 boxes of yellow yam every week. And so I can now approach my distribution channels. And so that whole chain would work extremely well. So it guarantees the supplier consistency. It guarantees the producers that they can produce to a definite market need. And so all the pieces can be put together along that whole value chain. And that means that the farmer will be guaranteed prices and will be able to work consistently in terms of production and dovetailing the whole process.
Wow.
I could give lots more examples. For example,
I know, right? And in fact, I can I was enthralled just listening to you and you sharing your knowledge about consolidation, the pitfalls, the benefits, and so on. And in fact, I've seen a number of questions pop up about how to get in touch with you. Because some people are having, ideas about consolidating and things like that. But, just to remind our panelists to please place not the panelists, the participants, to place your questions in the Q&A. We will answer them at the end of this session. Rita, we really want to thank you for sharing
Can
with
I
us this
add
morning.
just two little things? I
Sure.
think what is critical that we have found out in terms of our shipping. For example, I supply thyme and Scotch bonnet peppers to a guaranteed market for the last 10 years. My supply has not been consistent. And I want to let the farmers know now, the price of thyme is $400 a pound. It's not sustainable to your importer who is using it in his patio operations. There's a tremendous niche market for red scallion, for Jamaican thyme. They've used thyme from Colombia, they've used it from other countries and have rejected it because the flavor is so intense of the Jamaican product. So Conrad, I want to say to farmers, focus on these niche products that have so much market potential that can be packaged differently. For example, if you produce the red scallion, which has a very intense flavor, unlike the white, if you produce it with the proper protocols, vacuum pack it, and get it into market, so it is not contaminated with the army worm and stuff, just have a huge market there. Soursop, if we can get the pulp and ship it out instead, then we can penetrate the US market everywhere. If we pre-cook the sweet potatoes and vacuum pack them, we can get into the US market and almost ready to eat. So here are the niche markets that we need to containerize and ship out. And that's where the opportunities are. So we need a forum where we can bring committed people together to produce to what the market needs and stop just flapping around the whole place and focus on what Jamaica can do well. Never mind about the rest, leave it alone. Focus on what Jamaica can do well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita, for
Mango
that
stew.
candid,
Yes.
Conrad.
informative session. And in fact, what I'm hearing again, participants, is value added, value add, value add, value add. It's very critical.
Can I just add one point to what Rita mentioned as well? In the UK, brand Jamaica is real. Okay? People who can't speak English know Jamaica. Jamaica is a cultural superpower. That flag is everywhere. So a simple point in terms of marketing your product, as Rita says, put it in nice packaging. If you want to export, put the flag on it. Put on the flag. Yes. Make Jamaica loud and proud.
Yes.
And people respond to that. In fact, the products that we sell, made in Jamaica, the text is important, but the flag is even more important.
Yes, there's an affinity to that flag, to that black, green, and gold. Thank you very much for that intervention again, Junior. And ladies and gentlemen, just to remind you that another poll is coming out. Just for you to indicate your interest. Are you interested in consolidating your export shipment? If so, we're going to invite you to send us an email here at Jampro. My email address, I will place it in the chat in a few minutes. But it would be great if you could just answer that question for us real quick before we move into our final segment. And then we will, put you in touch with people who are in the consolidation business. So thank you very much again, Rita, for sharing with us. And just to remind our panelists that the questions are in the Q&A. So if you have an opportunity to go and check the Q&A, please do. There are questions that are going to be related to your specific market, and just prepare yourselves to answer at the end of the session. Thanks again for sharing with us and for being here with us this morning. We're gonna turn over now to our third and final session, which has now to do with Jamaica Customs and Export Jamaica. And to lead that conversation is our VP of Marketing here at Jampro, Mr. Gabriel Heron, and he will be having a discussion with Andre Williams from Jamaica Customs. And so I'm going to turn over now to Gabriel for him to take us through that conversation.
Thank you very much, Conrad, and I must say the session so far has been very engaging, and I'm sure all the attendees would agree. Andre Williams is here with us from Customs as Conrad Robinson just mentioned. No, my apologies, Conrad. But before I get into the discussion, I want to kind of frame the conversation around, because we just now heard about the export markets overseas. And we heard about the opportunities, and we heard about the trade issues, and we heard about some of the challenges and consolidation. Of course, around all of this is customs and that nexus of trade that we all have to pass through. As a country in 2019, we did 1.5 billion worth of exports for the year. Now, of that, we have the non-traditional and the traditional element component. A large component of that, of course, would speak to the bauxite, alumina. However, a significant over 700 million speaks about the traditional products. So you're talking about the rum, the coffee, pumpkin, yam, ackee, etc., etc. So a lot of our manufacturers and agro-processors and farmers clearly will need to access and go through customs in that regard. So I framed the conversation. So Andre, this puts you at the center of an important process in essence. So what I want to start off with is right now, Jamaica Exporter JA is a platform that currently persons can go online to process their exporter registration. And this is a partnership between Jampro and Customs. Over the last year or two, Customs and Jampro have been working very closely to get this platform up and running. We had a pilot launch in August of last year. Over 200 exporters have now utilized the platform to register. Now, after that process, Andre, right, what I want you to speak to now, apart from giving a whole introduction around the process itself, what are some of the main benefits? 200 exporters have been registered through the online Export JA platform. What are the benefits that have been given, or does this platform give to our exporters and customs and the general ecosystem on a whole?
All right, thank you for that, Gabriel, and good morning to the other panelists and to our listeners. As you rightly said, the matter of export is one that is very important, and we looked at simplifying the regulatory requirements, all the documents that would have to be submitted to customs, and the information that is going to be passing also between customs, Jampro, who has the responsibility of registering the exporters, and then also the other regulatory agencies involved. So we would have started looking at simplifying the registration process for exporters, and that is what led to the development of the Exporter JA module. Of course, that is within the Asikuda World System.
Yes.
What we've seen is a reduction in the documentary requirements because the system is already integrated with the tax administration, company's office. And so those details no longer have to be submitted by way of documents. We simply need for them to reference the details, and thereafter they can, the system validates the information and they can move on with completing the application. We'd also have introduced a self-registration portal, allowing for the exporters no longer filling out a physical document, but going online on the portal, completing their registration and going ahead to make their application, whether it is for a new exporter or they're completing a renewal process. And that is specific to the commodities that they're trading, to include also online payment. So no longer does the exporter have to come to the office to deliver those documents and to make payment at the point of sale. That can all now be done from the convenience of their office or their home, or wherever it is that is most appropriate.
So there's a significant increase in convenience to the exports, and it is my hope that with this increase in convenience, the service is now scalable. So a lot more persons can get involved and start doing exporting, and there's not hassle of having to go down physically, move from Jampro to the different agencies to get your export processed, which is excellent. And it leads me to the next question, right? So we know that there are benefits of the platform. You can now go online, it's convenient. could you walk us through some of the upcoming services that you have planned?
Well, we, as you rightly said, Jampro is one of the partnerships. There are others. We can speak to the implementation of the Jamaica single window for trade, which now includes all the border regulatory agencies, ensuring that we have a single ecosystem where our exporters can access all the export services from the respective border agencies. One of the important documents to exporters, of course, is a certificate of origin to benefit from the different economic partnership agreements, as was mentioned in earlier conversation.
Yes, a critical part of the process. Yes.
Very critical, right? So that service is actually been developed within the single window and will be piloted during the month of February. Of course, we have some more sensitization and training to do for the stakeholders, and that, of course, includes our exporters, and that will be made available. So we're all aware that the application as it exists now is a manual one to the trade board. And of course, customs has oversight for one of the trade agreements. These will all now be available within the single window as an online service. We're also looking at the export services related to the specific border regulatory agencies. Trade Board would have been the first who would have been fully onboarded for both import and export services, and those processes are now fully automated. The Ministry of Agriculture Plant Quarantine Produce Inspection Branch is actually now in a pilot phase for import, and shortly thereafter, we are going to be introducing the export services, and that also has to do with the packing house certification, where all of these will be offered as online services, online export application, online payment, online approval, and that information is moving seamlessly into the customs system. So we will not be requiring traders to be moving from one office to the next. We will simply be moving data between the ministries and customs.
So this is music to the average exporter's ear, and that's the whole ecosystem on a whole. The idea that it is all seamless, more efficient, and now it is scalable. So and in my mind, I want us to transition now, because you have the large exporters, fine, but let's speak more to the smaller exporters and the fact that the system is now scalable. Let's now move on to fees, because as a small exporter, there are always challenges with the fees. I want you to speak to what are some of the opportunities or avenues that the smaller exporter can take. And while you're referring to that as well, we had discussions before now about the e-commerce aspect of it and the CAF, and how can the smaller exporter operate within the space as it is now, and leveraging the different channels to ensure that it's not as expensive or their margins aren't consumed within the export process.
So I'm glad you, for the way you framed it. There's in fact one static fee. It's a processing fee, the customs administration fee, which is $3,005. And that is for all exports. It doesn't matter the volume or the size. It could be a container or a small package. As you rightly said, there would be somewhat of a disadvantage for the smaller exporters. Some persons are trying to get into the online or e-commerce exports from Jamaica as well. They do have the opportunity to benefit from the services of couriers who are allowed to consolidate a number of packages for the same cost of $3,005. And that reduces the cost per package for the smaller exporters. So we want for persons to be aware of these opportunities, and so that they don't necessarily have to pay that $3,005 for something that would be considered of very low value. The cost is something that has been raised by, of course, persons within the sector having to treat with those smaller packages. And representation is being made with the Ministry of Finance to revisit or to look at the fees for the smaller packages or low value packages. But so the opportunity, yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, Andre. Sorry, go ahead.
Right, but the opportunity is in fact there to make use of the services of a consolidator or courier, which reduces the cost to the exporter.
So just to be clear, as it relates to the customs administration fee, it would be ideal for a smaller exporter to work through a courier, right, who will then consolidate and ship over. So you have an e-commerce platform, you work through a courier to deliver your goods there, and then it goes over. So in that way, you won't have the individual charges
There
per
you go.
shipment that you send out. So that's an opportunity for, because I
That is
know
an
that in
opportunity.
speaking with a lot of persons, that's one of the challenges that they encounter. So this, which is why I'm emphasizing the point here today. And I'm glad you clarified that as well. There's a question around fees. Is $3,500 for new exporters, correct? Or $3,005?
The CAF on exports is $3,005.
$3,005. Okay, there's just a point of clarification. All right, so the platform has been up as a pilot since August last year.
Yes.
How does it work now for new exporters or renewal? Is it a mandatory service for new exporters
Right.
and renewals?
Right, so it is in fact required for persons who are now interested in being registered with Jampro as an exporter. They will have to go on the platform, do the self-registration, and then complete the online application form, which is routed to Jampro for verification. If there's a need for site inspection, that is also done, and your approval is granted online, which thereafter immediately allows you access to the customs management system to complete your export declarations. So it's all in one service. For those who already are registered in the system and are doing a renewal, they will simply go and select the record, and they're able to complete the renewal process within the system, and that further extends their use of the customs management system to carry out the export declarations. So in a nutshell, we are wanting to ensure that our services are fully accessible at the convenience of our exporters, right? So reduce logistics in terms of, we don't want to be passing paper, we want to be passing data and ensuring that they can get on with their business.
So the service offers interoperability, and it's a lot more seamless now, and the experience from the exporter is also significantly improved. Right. So last point I'd like to discuss before I hand over to Mr. Robinson. There has been talk recently about the Customs Act and how do we incorporate brokers versus the individual, because the volume of export is significantly impacted in that way. And we just spoke about consolidating versus going through it individually. Could you speak to that and how we're looking to make changes?
Right. So as you're rightly saying, there is a new Customs Act, which of course is on the way. The current act is dated from 1945, and as you can imagine, it really was gearing at levying penalties, etc., a more rigorous framework for compliance. The new act really is focused on trade facilitation. Trade is far more dynamic, and we realize that there are different forms of businesses that are emerging. We are talking about third-party logistics, reverse logistics. These are all opportunities. And so we wanted to ensure that the Customs Act allows for us to support these new forms of business that are emerging, and of course, for reduced complexity and ease of doing business. So the Customs Act is exactly geared at that, to simplifying things and making our services far more trade facilitative. And of course, an overall improvement. We do understand the importance of export to our economy. I also wanted to make one last point, Gabriel, if I may. The Jamaica Customs Agency also is looking at an authorized economic operator program for exporters, or we normally term it as the AEO. And that really is a preferential treatment based on a secure supply chain. That is a service that is currently available on the import side. We have authorized economic operators. However, the genesis of the program was really geared at exports. And now we're looking into that framework, which of course will allow for the establishment of a trusted supply chain for the faster movement of goods into these markets. And that is both a reciprocating service between the partnering countries, right? So that of course is also going to be bringing about additional benefits for exporters, encouraging the whole process of export.
So two follow-up questions, because I think you raised a very important point there that I wasn't anticipating. Could you give me a timeline on the Customs Act 1? And that was going to come in, Andre. Because we hear about a lot of times we hear about the activities in the pipeline, but and I don't want to hold you to it, but give us at least some kind of framework. And also, if we can find out where we could get more information around the export side of the operations you just mentioned, because that would be critical as well. Where can that information be sourced?
All right, so we do have some, and bear in mind that we're saying that we are working on the Authorized Economic Operator Program for exports. So we will be sharing information as that is more developed. The Customs Act, of course, is on the way. The current version of the act, which is currently being reviewed, is also available on our website. I actually don't want to go to a limb to give you a timeline, because timelines have been set. We understand the complexities. We're also now looking at the regulations which will be associated with the act as well.
Right.
And we are wanting to ensure that we have a modern act really to support a business. It is all about trade facilitation, right? So that much we can guarantee you, that we'll be in a much better space in terms of trade from a cross-border perspective.
Yes. Okay. All right. Andre, I do want to speak to, are there any challenges currently that users of the platform, just to kind of soften their expectations a bit, that you would like to speak to before I hand over to Conrad? Because I know the time is basically ready for us to get into a riveting Q&A session. I'm seeing the questions are coming in fast and furious. So,
Sure. Well, just like with all IT platforms, we had some kinks to work out. It wasn't a smooth start, but we had to make further improvements based on the feedback, of course, from Jampro and from the exporters' experience, mitigating against a number of other little issues. And no, I think we have ironed out, I would say most, if not all, and we are seeing the numbers of registered exporters increasing significantly. And that speaks to the ease of using the service. Of course, there's always room for improvement. We are going to be doing further integration with the other border regulatory agencies, and that is where the single window comes in. So you can listen out for more e-services that are going to be coming, being made available under that project. Like we said, we are targeting the piloting of the export services for plant quarantine. Then thereafter, we're going to move to Veterinary Services Division and JACRA as it concerns export. I know that is one of the major points for persons who are dealing with those products, and those services also will be automated to get the requisite permits for export.
Wonderful. All right. So thank you very much, Mr. Williams, and thanks to Jamaica Customs Agency. Really, really appreciative of the time spent with us here to kind of ventilate all those important information. Mr. Robinson, back over to you, and as we move on to the Q&A session, which I can see will be very, very interesting.
Very interesting. Thank you. So thank you very much, Gabriel. Andre, thank you very much for joining us in this conversation this morning. The information provided was very useful, and now that we are transitioning into the digital age, I think that the fact that we are able to access and to the services of Jamaica Customs, particularly for exporters online, I think will go a long way in helping us to move the needle on export sales. So thank you again for having joined us in this conversation. And as Gabriel said, we're going to jump right into the Q&A. We have well over 60 odd questions in the Q&A. Not sure how many of that we will get through in the next 10 minutes or so, but just to remind our participants that the session is being recorded, and a link to the session will be emailed to you once you have registered for this forum. But also you can access this forum on our Jampro YouTube channel. So you can go there and you'll be able to view this session as well. So one quick question, I'm not sure if it is for Dees or for Rita. Rita, we're not hearing you.
I'm so sorry. I've unmuted. Go ahead.
Yes. So so we have one question that I'm not sure is for Dees or Rita. The question was whether or not there's a market for Jamaican cassava in UK and or North America.
I'm not sure about that. Maybe the UK people or Canada. I think it was mentioned by Mr. Sharu that there was a market for cassava. And what form is that market? Because I know there are a lot of cassava producers that would welcome this initiative. So it's not, I'm not aware. So I would like Dees or Mr. Sharu to respond to that.
Yes, Stephen, RDs.
Sure. Thanks, Conrad, and thanks, Rita. Yes, there is a demand for cassava in Canada. In particular, we have been getting requests for processed cassava, so peel and pre-cut cassava, because as you know, cassava is a difficult, relatively difficult product to peel and to process. So a lot of value added process treatment we're seeing that sort of request coming out of Canada for the cassava in particular.
Mm. All right, thank you for that, Stephen. I'm not sure if Junior is still on, but we'll just move right into the other. Or Lawrence, I don't know if you have any input on that regards to cassava for the UK market.
Yes, I know Junior had to leave for another meeting. It's primarily in the BAMI section, processed BAMI, which is ambient, which has a good shelf life. I know in the past, Junior and Dees have come to Jamaica and explored opportunities to buy from local producers, and that has been going on for years. So it's there. No, I'm looking at things more like processed breadfruit, aloe, and those things. New markets, so
yes,
we can
again,
grow
we're
the
hearing
numbers.
value add. Again, we're hearing that.
Thanks.
You know, we will probably need to do another session on the export opportunity for value-added products. So that is something that
yes.
we will look to doing as well.
Definitely, Conrad. I know there's a big demand for BAMI because it's a gluten-free product, and a lot of people are turning away from processed white rice. I know about that market, but I'm very interested in what Stephen had to say about peeling sweet cassava and pre-cooking it and vacuum packing it. I know the biggest leader in this market is Central America, Costa Rica, Honduras. There are huge operations, and I don't know how the Jamaican cassava would step against that. So we need some more input from Sharu about, from Stephen, sorry, about what the market entry level would be and what the specs are. And that would be really interesting. I would welcome that input from Stephen.
Thanks, Rita, and you're absolutely correct. I mean, I don't think we can compete with the raw product of cassava because, as you rightfully said, I think the marketplace is flooded with products from South America, Latin America, because they are heavy consumers of cassava. I think where we have an opportunity is for value-added products. So Lawrence mentioned BAMIs. I can confirm that there is a shortage of BAMI in Canada. I've gotten numerous requests from importers and distributors for BAMI. It's very hard to find. So yes, it's really about the value-added products of cassava, but not necessarily the raw product in its original form.
All right, thank you very much for this. I'm not sure who will answer this, whether or not it's Andre or somebody from the panel, but there's a question here about, do I need a license to export flowers to North America?
Conrad, I don't think so, because we used to be a large exporter of tropical flowers, especially heliconias, and also plants. I don't think there are any special regulations apart from phytosanitary regulations of pests and diseases on that. I think that market is pretty open, but it was taken up. We lost it to Costa Rica, which was producing much less expensive and had better linkages into the market than we did. So there was a huge operation in St. Thomas when planes used to come in to pick up the plant material, and those were back in the days. And I also wanted to add to what Andre was talking about. When I got into exports in the early days, I won't say when, it was like 22 stops before completing the export process. So I really welcome the whole digitization of the process. Thank you.
Yes, thanks again, Rita, for your input. Hi, Lawrence. Nicholas Parker here in the UK. How can Jampro assist in working with farmers, exporters like myself in obtaining global GAP certification?
Thank you, Conrad. I saw the question. So I know the Ministry of Agriculture had a funded program to get quite a number of Jamaican farms certified global GAP. I think that's the main port. Also, the agribusiness department in Kingston at Jampro, the team there can also give you some guidance on the licensing requirements. And we also have a paper on it. So if they send me an email address, we can share with them, you know, the information that we've obtained and put in one place about global gap in Jamaica.
All right, thanks, Lawrence. So again, I've seen where Lawrence has posted his email address in the chat and also in the Q&A. So if you want to send him an email, I'm sure he will welcome that. Good morning. I'm interested in exporting, but not sure where to start. Will you be having a beginner's class anytime soon? Again, I'm going to refer you to our Jampro website for that one. And also you can give us a call here at Jampro. We have some very competent people who will help to walk you through the exporter registration process. So, you know, it's not a very difficult process and it is something that is easily accessible. Why is it so expensive to ship by air to the Eastern Caribbean? Nick, I am not sure if you can answer that. Why is it so expensive to ship by air to the Eastern Caribbean?
Hi, Conrad. Yes, thanks for that question. Basically, it's a matter of supply. There are very few airlines which go down to the Eastern Caribbean, especially from Jamaica. Basically, you're reliant on Caribbean Airlines if you're going to go from Jamaica, or depending on what you're doing, the other options are Miami. So basically, because Caribbean Airline has almost monopoly on flying down to the Eastern Caribbean, especially into Trinidad, Barbados, and from there on, you're looking at smaller planes through from Liat going into places like St. Lucia and Grenada. That basically is the challenge. Few providers, so they can charge higher prices. I don't see a solution to that anytime in the near future, to be honest with you.
Thanks, Nick. But we have quite a few questions for the Eastern Caribbean, Nick. Not sure if you'll be able to answer all of them, but I'll just shoot two to you right away. How do we get in contact with fresh produce wholesale importers in the Eastern Caribbean and other Caribbean market? One. Two, what about exporting to fresh produce from St. Vincent and Trinidad to the UK? And there's also one more for you, Nick. What's the prospect for bottled water in the Eastern Caribbean?
All right, let's start with the first one. Sorry, could you repeat the first one for me?
It's about distributors for fresh.
Get in touch with Jampro.
Yes.
Get in touch with us here at Jampro with myself, and we'll see how we can assist you in connecting you with distributors and importers in the Eastern Caribbean, CARICOM Islands. Let me be specific. And sorry, your second question?
Bottled water. What's the prospect for bottled water in the Eastern Caribbean?
Hard to say. Really, it would depend on each island. You'd really have to do some research on what the brandscape is in those islands, how much of it is imported, how much of it is local, what's the price points. You're looking at somewhere like Trinidad, difficult market because of Blue Waters. Same thing in St. Lucia, where Blue Waters actually have their own bottling plant in St. Lucia. St. Lucia actually has higher import taxes than any other CARICOM islands for importation of bottled water or anything else labeled water. So it really is a mixed bag. You really have to kind of do some research island by island and see what the price points are and see if your product is competitive and not only being restricted to water, but other products. You have to consider your marketing budget. You have to consider, do I have a marketing budget ready to go? Generally, distributors will require you to put up 50% of marketing. They'll put up the other 50%. Marketing in the Eastern Caribbean is generally cheaper than trying to do it in the United States, but you have to do sampling. You have to budget in temporary price reductions. Your importer might ask you for a launch budget, which might be extra cases of your particular product or cash up front, so they can start to do sampling in supermarkets. A lot of chain supermarkets in some of the Eastern Caribbean islands require you to do 2 to 3 weeks of sampling, depending on the category you're in. So these are all things to consider. Mm-hmm. And I believe you had a third question.
No, we will get to that in an email response for that question. I just quickly want to ask, as we are coming close to wrap up time, is there a market for natural skincare products such as turmeric soap, face oils, etc.? I don't know who's going to take that one. But that is a question that we have here. Is there a market for natural skincare products such as turmeric soaps, face oils, etc.?
Well, Conrad, certainly from the UK market, it is very strong over here. The demand for over-the-counter drugs as well as cosmetic products. So it ranges everything from Jamaican black castor oil. If you can get genuine Jamaican black castor oil, it is a premium product. And companies such as Pax Cosmetics, P-A-K-S, is part owned by a Jamaican. It is the largest Afro-Asian beauty and cosmetics company in the UK, with over 27 shops, warehousing facilities, and distribution through Europe. And we have worked closely with them to get a number of Jamaican cosmetic brands into this market. Again, we have to ensure that one, there is consistency in the supply of your product. Two, that the ingredients are meet the regulatory requirements, and that you are prepared to leave your ingredient list with your distributor. So when the local authorities come in to check health and safety, that it is there. So there is a strong demand, and what we're seeing is that there are companies in the United States and in West Africa which are claiming to be Jamaican beauty products and selling them on the market. So we can push for the authenticity, and we have the support of one of the owners of the largest cosmetic companies, distribution companies in the UK.
Thanks for that, Lawrence. And in fact, there was a question on castor oil in the Q&A. Somebody wanted to know whether or not there's a market for castor oil and how they can get, into that market. So your answer did help with addressing that question. But go ahead. It seems like you need to.
No, I was going to encourage that person to connect with the Jampro head office, the sales and promotion team there, who will ensure that your products meet certain requirements, that you are approved approved exporter. And once we have a strong brief on what you're producing, the quality and the consistency, then we can match them with prospective buyers in this market. I'll be frank with you, we get lots of requests, especially from diaspora businesses, for bulk castor oil with a view of processing it further, repackaging it for retail. There is demand. So we're happy to look at that with you.
All right, so one final question for Ms. Hilton. Are there consolidation opportunities for refrigerated goods in the markets that you work in?
I would say yes, there is a lot of market interest for refrigerated goods, but remember that the minimum size would be like a 20-foot reefer box. So you would need about 400 to 500 40-pound boxes to fill that container to make the freight economic, right? So it would have to be a variety of refrigerated products. And I think this is an amazing opportunity that exists in the more ready-to-eat markets, with the yellow yam, sweet potato, breadfruit, ackee, a whole lot of stuff that is not canned, but more ready to eat and available in that way.
All right, thank you very much.
Expressing interest. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let me just use this opportunity to thank all of our panelists for participating this morning. Of course, Gabriel, Rita, Lawrence, Andre, Stephen, Nicholas, and of course, those who are, and the 300 and plus of you who have stayed with us throughout this session. Please be reminded that the video of this event will be available on our YouTube channels. Once you have registered for this, we will send you the link as well, so you will have that, you'll be able to connect there as well. And please feel free to shoot us an email here at Jampro to answer your export related questions. We will respond to the questions in the Q&A via email where that is possible. And I just really want to thank you guys again for joining us in this conversation. And I want to wish for you a good rest of the day and look out for our next session. And I'm itching to say that we want to do something on export opportunity in value added products. So we will explore that and get back to you in short order. Thank you very much again and have a good rest of the day.
Conrad, if I may jump in for a
Oh,
second.
it's too late. You've cooked the chicken already.
If I may jump in for a moment. I
Oh,
saw
sure.
some
Go ahead, Nick.
questions around honey, exporting honey. I'm going to encourage anybody who has our export ready to do honey to please get in contact with me. We have 1 or 2 buyers out to the US who have been interested in honey, but their concerns have been consistency of supply and capacity. But if there are such persons, please get in touch with me and I'll see what I can do to help.
And again, just before we close, I'm going to ask again all of the panelists, just put your email addresses in the chat so that those who are online will be able to access you after we end here today. Thanks again, ladies and gentlemen. Have a very good rest of the day. This is Conrad Robinson from Jamaica, signing off.